we didn't write for quite a while. I think me and Luke were a little bit burnt out on kind of the industry and just the whole general being in a band thing. So we'd kind of been burying our heads in the sand a little bit, and we'd kind of got to a point where it's kind of either we do this or we don't do this. So yeah, like at the end of the day, we kind of just got together at a friend's house in the Cotswolds and kind of just wrote for ourselves, really, just to prove to ourselves that we can do it again. And it turns out we had a load of fun doing it, and we ended up writing some of the best stuff we've ever written. So yeah, that we didn't really write anything until we forced ourselves to just get away and escape into the countryside.
What's the opposite of prolific? Because that's me and Lewis with songwriting. Because it's just like we kind of, you know, so that you get some musicians and writers that write a song a day. Do you know what I mean? They just, that's their natural workflow and that's how they thrive. But I think me and Lewis, certainly up until, you know, everything up until now, we've always thrived off having a common goal. And I think unless we sit down and we're like, right, we need to do this, we'll just do everything else until then. I think for us, writing is a zone that we get into, and you get better at slipping into that the more that you do. But I think for this band and the way we feel towards it, we're very much just like, when we're feeling in the, you know, when we feel like we're ready to write, we go and write, and then all the rest of it we're worrying about, I don't know, like keeping our girlfriends happy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to not be prolific as well, and I definitely think the Preston Meco back catalogue is a case of, you know, quality, not quantity. So that's
very kind of you.
Well, thank you, Jake, our bassist.
No
worries,
biggest
fan.
And biggest fan.
Our only fan. I think for me personally as well with writing, I have to be passionate about wanting to write for it as well. Like I think if I'm someone where, you know, like Jake said, we've had so much advice over the years, and you meet so many different kinds of people that have different ways of working. But I feel like Lewis is the same, where if we had to set ourselves a goal of writing one song every day, we'd just burn ourselves out, and like the end 7 songs we'd have at the end of a week, for example, wouldn't be as good as the one we could write in a month, having that time to kind of feel it out, ease into it. And I
think we like being in that headspace as well, where it's just like you're in that creative bubble, and there's so many other things that you have to deal with. There's so many different hats you have to wear being a band these days, that you just get caught up in so many other things. And yeah, I think for us, like, we just work well when we have no other distraction. I think we're both a little bit ADHD anyway, so it's just like, get in a room, this is the only thing we're focusing on. We don't have any other dramas or any, you know, we got no music videos to shoot. We got no
To put that into perspective, I was supposed to authorize a bank transition earlier, and I thought I'd done it, and then when Lewis asked me if I'd done it, I went back to it and I'd forgotten to push confirm. So it's like you take that same brain and try write songs with that when you've got other shit going on. It's like the songs are just not going to get written, you know?
So the opening track is it's kind of just a little intro teasery thing. But the name Transmute I've had in my notes for ages, and I've just been waiting for the right time to use it. And we've, you know, obviously we parted with a member before we started writing this album, and for us it was kind of like this was kind of like a big moment of change for us anyway, either, you know, kind of deciding whether we were going to press on being a band, even doing music. You know, there was a lot of questions hanging over us at that point. And yeah, it just felt like there was kind of like a lot of change happening in our lives and as the band as well. And I think that was included a lot in the writing as well. It was a recurring theme. So yeah, it just married well with everything we were writing and feeling at the time, really.
And just COVID happened.
And also, like, I like the idea of kind of like questioning whether any of these changes that we're going through will be for the better as well, and like the idea of like just how hard positive change can sometimes be in your life. And that's why I like the word transmute, because it was so often used, you know, with kind of like alchemy and trying to transform lead into gold, which was obviously a pipe dream. But I just kind of like that metaphor of like, you know, trying to make yourself a better person and just how hard that is sometimes. Again, just going off the idea of change and I work with the same artist we worked with on the last album, Here's to the Fatigue, Max Malone, who does great work with collage. And yeah, I pitched him kind of like my ideas around the album and just the themes behind it. There were a few ideas bouncing back and forth, but there was this picture of a reactor from like I think it was from like a National Geographic magazine from like the 50s or the 60s or something. It must have been the 60s. And yeah, we just kept coming back to this picture of this big round nuclear reactor. And there was really something in it. And he started messing around with it. And he'd done some other stuff where he'd kind of sliced all these layers up and shifted them round, so it kind of had a spiral effect. And we've always liked spirals in this band as well. I think I've always liked the idea of like spirals representing like the passage of time, where things feel like they might be repeating themselves over and over, but they also may be slightly changing. So we used again a spiral in the in some of the previous artworks as well. Anyway, yeah, and so just we again, some of the themes on this album were kind of like the idea of how technology is advancing so much, and how we may not be kind of like evolved to deal with it yet, and how it might be affecting us in certain ways. So yeah, just the idea of like having those technological themes, and then kind of the reflections in the reactor of like the nature and the duality of the two things, basically.
I always like the whole every kind of man-made consequence has a natural, every man-made effect has a natural consequence balance as well. Like I think I like the how that ties in with the theme of the record. And
yeah,
like
we can't do anything without having such a huge impact.
Yeah. Even if it's a tiny thing, like, you know, we were chatting about this the other day, we're so huge now, there's so many of us, any one small thing has a catastrophic, you know, effect on everything, you know, like and I think as well, this album feels like it means the most, I think, for us. Like I definitely feel like we've connected with this record, and whether that's because of the subject matter or how we were feeling at the time, or arguably, you know, me and Lewis were pretty much ready to call it a day before we started writing this. Whether that, you know, or whether it's an accumulation of all of those things, I think it feels like it's the first time we've really properly been able to sound how we feel. Do you know what I mean? On a body of work.
That was a funny one, because that was probably one of the ones that we'd written in a completely different way, where Luke had just started off with a bass line, and I was working on some other things at the time, and I kept coming in and out of the room, and I remember just that bass line going round and round. I was just like, what is this? what is he doing right now? And then I can't remember how it kind of slowly came together, but
that was one of those ones that kind of, you know, some songs just come out in one go, you know, other than the lyrics and all the finessing that you do afterwards. But like, that was one of those songs where, you know, like Lewis, I think you were writing lyrics at the time, and I was just kind of sat, like I'd put a bunch of structures together, and I think Lewis made a passing comment, just like, fuck it, pick up the bass and write a song, you know, or just have a jam on the bass first. And then kind of that whole thing came out quite quickly. I remember there's one bit where Lewis came back, and I kind of back and forth like the way the chorus line progressed with him. I was like, what feels the best here? Then he went away, and then it's kind of like that, you know, I think I'd laid down the majority of the vocal except for the Big Witch a bit as well. And
yeah,
I think it was kind of like sorry, we refer to the big harmony section as the Witcher 3 section, because it sounds like something off the game The Witcher soundtrack. But yeah, like that was one of those songs that just kind of all came out in one go, and it's nice when that happens. And I think it was just because I'm a big fan of sometimes limiting yourself with your tools, because it forces you to be, I feel anyways, it forces you to be a bit more creative with less. And I think sometimes that can spark a bit of inspiration. And for this example, it was like, take away guitars, take away everything else, just write something that stands on its own with just a bass line. And then that kind of gave me a bit of inspiration to bring a whole song out. I think as well, like Lewis said, you know, we'd always, leading up to the first release or the first single, we, in our heads, that was always going to be a follow-up single to Transmute. And then kind of like the more people that heard it, the more like your label hears it, it's like you realize there's, you know, there's something to this, and this is probably too strong to not be on the record. And I think there was a bit of resistance at first, because we'd kind of like always had that on the back burner, like, right, we can put the record out, the record's this body of work, and then we can have Smouldering Sticks to drop pretty soon after. But then it's like the more we kind of came to terms with, actually it does sit on the album quite well, and it does add a whole other flavor and a whole different sound. We started to really enjoy the thought of that being part of the record. And as well, it's just I think it's cool because it does just add a whole different color to the record. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a whole different shade of the PTM grey.
It took a bit of convincing for a little while.
Yeah,
because we were so dead set on having it be something to put out after the album came out. Because initially, I think you two guys had kind of written it in a different headspace to write in a majority 100%. Of the rest of the album. So obviously you have that connection with it where you think, I don't think it really sits with the rest of the songs until we started putting a track listing together. And then it was like, oh, this
it feels great.
feels fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
Big boy riff. Big boy riff.
Gargantuan riff. Yeah, like, actually, I think that was the oldest song that we had, because I'd had that chord progression floating about for a while. We've half recorded a version of that when we recorded Easy Life, which was the single we dropped kind of in between albums. Yeah. So we've had it in the back pocket for a while. Yeah, because I remember when we recorded Easy Life, I think at the time, it was all a very confusing time in the band at that moment. None of us really knew what we were doing and what was getting released when. But I think we went in to record Easy Life in mind to that being like, okay, this is the first track off the new record. And then we got half of Another Day down in mind to go back and finish it. And then we go do the next songs in a big chunk and then kind of build the record like that. But then I'm so glad it didn't happen that way, because again, like Lewis was saying, with our approach to writing, we like to go and do the thing we're doing and get it done. And we definitely feel that way with a record, where it's like, if we're going to go do an album, let's go do it as one body of work at the same time. I felt like that song really sparked what this album was going to become as well. I think that was kind of it just summed up everything in one vibe, really, especially how we wanted to just sit on things a bit more, and thematically as well. It was kind of just the precursor to a lot of these songs, really. Yeah, I think it feels like a good... it makes sense because it was the oldest one, but it felt like... I think we wanted that to be the first single because it felt very quintessentially Presta Meco, or at least what people know of the band, but it also kind of has that darker edge, that kind of, like Lewis's the bridge that Lewis does, for example. I feel like that's as emotive as we've ever been, if not the most emotive up until that point. And I think that's a good setup for what's coming on the rest of the record. So it just felt like a natural first single. Also, Jake first heard it and thought it slapped, so that was reassuring.
Yeah, when I first heard the demo, when they sent it over to me, I was like, oh, you do realise that this is the best thing you've ever written. At the time, I thought it was anyway. And then, just hearing it evolve and then to what it finally became, it's just, I absolutely adore it. And then they asked me to shout all over it in the middle, and I was happy to oblige.
Yeah, this is the song that I was quietly confident about, and I'd kind of thrown out there as a wild card even before singles. We'd even started chatting about singles, just because sometimes there's just something about a song, and I felt that with Gold. And I think sometimes your perspective gets skewed a bit when you've been floating about the music industry for a while in what's gonna be the most commercially viable song to release, or what's gonna give us the best chance at radio, or what's gonna give us the this and that, and it's all stuff that you need to consider. Surely it's not the one we shout all over. Yeah, and turn into the Mars Volta for a bridge section, and it's just like, so I think sometimes you've got to introspect a bit and be like, what does this band do best sometimes? And I think Gold is an accumulation of of everything that we can do well. Do you know what I mean? As well as the next single does that on the other side of the coin.
And it's funny. It's funny with songs that sit a little bit more in certain genres as well, where it's like Gold has it's got such an angry vibe to it. People already know what it is on first listen, whereas with a lot of our other stuff, takes a little bit of like, oh, okay, what's going on here? But yeah, Gold is kind of a testament to that, where it's like, this is just a big angry vibe all the way through, and yeah, people kind of resonate with it and get it straight off the bat.
That's funny you put it like that, Lewis. I've never really thought of it like that, where it's like, oh yeah, you've really set the tone from the off. And I think it goes back to what you were saying about trying to just like write these songs and not get in the way of them, because you're pretty much guaranteed to make more of a connection that way.
Yeah.
Personally, I was very hesitant about putting this out as a single, not necessarily because of the reasons that Luke said, you want to see if it's commercially viable, etc. Mainly because, in the first two verses, me and Lewis are shouting very angrily, and I'm still somewhat the new guy, and I just felt like it was pretty bold.
Yeah.
And I just thought, are people ready for this one? Like, really? But I guess I'd already been introduced as adding that element to the band in Another Day and things like that. But for it to be that in the forefront, I was kind of like, whoa, okay, then.
Here we go.
Yeah, literally, here we go.
I think that's what made me excited to put that out, because it's just there's definitely more of that side of this band than we've arguably never gone as far down that route with the angst of this band as we have with Gold. And there's a track called Baby Steps, which I think goes there as well, on Sabotage. And there's a few real angry moments on this record, and I think I was excited just being like, oh, by the way, if you are into the band for these reasons, we're going to give this to you more than we ever have. And there's we're still a small band, so like even if only a small percentage of our fan base likes us for the craziness, it's like that's still actually quite significant for this band. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it's good to kind of give those people what they want as well in that regard. And like we said, I think we've all been extremely humbled by the reception of that, because we can put out a track like Smouldering Sticks, which is it's kind of a straight up alternative rock track, and then we can put out Gold, which goes a million different ways, and people are still showing the love, which is super
people
cool.
Still don't care as much as they didn't care before.
So we
great.
still have as little fans as we've always had, so
we can do whatever we want. I think just like this day and age and existing with all the changes that are happening and the amount of like mad input we're getting on a daily basis, it's just like, it's a weird thing to navigate, and I have no perspective on that other than, it's weird. We acknowledge that, and like maybe we can find a way forward to kind of like, I don't know, communicate on large scales better together, and kind of work towards some of the problems and stuff that we're facing in a more collaborative way. But like it's just kind of pointing towards the mad stuff that happens in life and acknowledging it, really. I don't know.
With a lot of the lyrical themes as well, I don't want to be speaking for you or anything here, but especially in Another Day, it's kind of that thing of saying like, it's okay to say that you don't like what's going on, because a lot of people feel so obliged to actually participate in the type of world that we live in now, in terms of being so connected in terms of communication. Like, you don't have to like it and participate. You can step away and say, actually, this probably isn't very good for me anyway, at least personally. And just read the lyrics, man. Lewis is good at writing the lyrics, man.
I think
Stop it.
I think like again, harping on what they've said in regards to just like a first listen, I hope for people who follow the band, they connect with this record as much, if not more, than they ever have before, because I feel like I said at the start of the interview that I feel like we've kind of laid it all out there more than we ever have. And for someone to really feel something from this, I think that's a job well done for us. So I think artistically, that's what I'd like, at least, just someone to really get something emotionally from this record.